The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette, for an effortless finish to your day. New Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
This is News Talk.
You're very welcome along. We're coming to you from Lansdowne Road this evening. Ireland's Nations League campaign off to the worst possible start in Armenia on Saturday evening. A quick turnaround though tonight, the comforts of home against the Ukrainian side, which was so close to World Cup qualification against Wales. We've live commentary with Nathan Murphy and Stuey Byrne. Text number as ever 53106. You'll get us at Off the Ball on Twitter. Beautiful evening in Dublin, blue skies, nice 16-17 degrees territory, bit of a wind, more going across the pitch than favouring either end, but really perfect evening for football. Both teams on the pitch. The Ukrainian team received a warm round of applause, as you might expect from those fans already inside the stadium, and both sets of players now just going through the beginnings of their warm-ups, passing the ball around. A beautiful evening for football, Nathan Murphy. We make it for Ukraine, their last day out, which was so disappointing against Wales. Just one player remains in their starting 11. Much change after a very demanding week last week. Stephen Kenny, two changes.
So one of them we knew, Joe. Seamus Coleman ruled out with an injury. They're hopefully maybe back for possibly the trip to Poland to take on Ukraine in 6 days' time. Cyrus Christie comes in, hasn't figured a huge amount under Stephen Kenny, played in those couple of games against Qatar, but very much third choice behind Matt Doherty and Seamus Coleman, and Ireland's arguably two best players both missing from this game. So Cyrus Christie gets an opportunity at right wing back, and Jason Knight comes into the side in place of Troy Parrott in the only other change. I thought he might have made a few more, considering the disappointment of the second half performance and also the grueling trip to Yerevan, the 36-degree heat, that maybe Stephen Kenny might have looked to freshen it up. But obviously he's decided to give this group of players another opportunity to go and try and redeem themselves and maybe finally get the Republic of Ireland a first ever victory in the Nations League, and maybe even a couple of goals as well. And it's a big opportunity tonight against the Ukraine side that are massively depleted because of the amount of changes that they've made. I think Ukraine are comfortably the best team in this group if they go full strength. You look at the quality of their performance against Scotland in the playoff semi-final, and even against Wales, where they battered Wales for the final 20 minutes but just couldn't break through. The manager afterwards said he was going to make widespread changes, thought he might actually change all 11, but as you say, Mikalenko, the Everton fullback, remains. But these players, they're playing for an awful lot. There's 2,000 Ukrainian supporters given free tickets here. I think there's going to be an awful lot more Ukrainians in the stadium here tonight. But also they're having to deal with the massive disappointment of missing out on World Cup qualification and the pressure that they put on themselves to try and qualify for the people of Ukraine. So this is a very difficult time for Ukraine to come to Dublin. From a purely footballing point of view, it makes it a big opportunity for the Republic of Ireland, and it's a very inexperienced Ukrainian side. Of their what will probably end up at times maybe being a back five, 4 of them have only one cap. It's a very young squad. The likes of Yarmolenko not even in the panel. Zinchenko is exceptional in the couple of games, is among the substitutes. So we need a response from the Republic of Ireland tonight. All the momentum that had been built over the last year, it seemed to dissipate in that second half, where, to be honest, at half time I didn't think it was that bad. I thought Ireland would score early in the second half. They'll kick on from here, but it was up there with the worst 45 minutes we've seen from Stephen Kenny's side. So they need to get back, they need to start winning games in this tournament, and tonight's a really good opportunity on a perfect evening in what you expect will be a pretty big crowd at the Aviva Stadium.
Yes, of those free tickets for Ukrainian fans, they're to our left, and it'll be to your left as you watch on television, the shorter end, I suppose we would have called it, the lower end. And it was interesting, the FAI left out Ukrainian flags on all of those seats, which was a nice touch. You wonder maybe might have been worth leaving a free flag on every seat across the stadium, but then again, maybe hospitality has to have some bounds when it's a competitive match. It is difficult to know what to expect from Ukraine this evening. As you said, a second string 11, and also their wins and their losses, not least most recently, take on an extra resonance for these players, because they are very much playing for their country in a way they never anticipated they would have to. And even a casual observer of Stephen Kenny's programme notes over the years won't be surprised to see that he's made note of the Ukrainian situation, and he talks about Alexander Petrikov, his counterpart, and all of his players and staff have been tremendous ambassadors for their country, writes Stephen Kennedy. We cannot begin to imagine the torment they have endured as they have witnessed thousands of their compatriots murdered and their country ravaged in devastating circumstances. And he talks about how their players have done Great service by continuing to play, and by that continue to highlight the injustice that their country has suffered. So the Ukrainian situation, as was the case last week, is difficult to predict. What you would say certainly is against Scotland and against Wales, they performed. They were not overwrought. They were not overly weighed down by the occasion. So you'd expect something similar from an emotional standpoint this evening, the disappointment of Friday notwithstanding. As for Ireland, it's funny, the talk here, Nathan, as we arrive, colleagues and different people you chat to when you come to a game, is suddenly this week, after what happened in Armenia, has taken on a slightly different sense of importance. You know, so often we've come here across Stephen Kenny's reign and it's been a mini referendum each international window on whether or not Kenny's the right man for the job, and that conversation really had been put paid to, I think, last year, and the new contract doubly so, and yet suddenly after the result on Saturday and this rather tricky looking fixture list, just talking to different people, there's now a sense that this has become maybe a more important week all of a sudden than we'd anticipated.
I think the only honeymoon period you ever get as Republic of Ireland manager is if you qualify for a tournament and there's a couple of friendlies in between. Everything else matters massively, and it's remarkable how we go from an obsession with English football in the Premier League, and last Thursday there's barely any talk of even Ireland, Armenia, and within 48 hours we are back wondering about Stephen Kenny's long-term future. And while I think a lot of people were able to write off the first half of his campaign, and the stats of 5 wins in 22 aren't pretty, but there were many reasons for the beginning, but we all thought that this was the real start for Stephen Kenny. A lot of these players are up into double figures in terms of cap. He's built a very big established squad where there is depth, where there's not a huge difference in quality if one player steps out and another one comes in. But the second half performance was so flat. Played into Ukraine, into Armenia's hands. They were so open at times. The amount of occasions that Ireland gave the ball away cheaply inside the Armenian half has been a constant factor under Stephen Kenny. So many of the chances come from simple technical breakdowns of players not being in the right position or not being able to pull off a simple 5-10 yard ball, and suddenly everybody's out of position. Those basics they have to get right tonight, and it does look as though Ukraine may go with a back three. They obviously played three in midfield, and you would have thought that if they come here at full strength to play three in midfield, they would absolutely have dominated a Jeff Hendrick, Josh Cullen midfield. The fact they're playing three at the back means Ireland may see a lot of possession again, but they have to make more use of it. The wing backs have to be better. If you're playing three at the backs and you're getting it out to them, the quality of deliveries into the area, you've got to be quick, you've got to take on the full back. That wasn't there at all in the second half. So I think you're right. I think, listen, Stephen Kenny has the contract in his back pocket. He was the one who talked up the Nations League. He was the one who said we can't use the excuse of we don't have the players. So they've got to go now and deliver. And if Ireland were to lose tonight, a packed house here against Scotland, who, again, on paper you would look at and say have better players than the Republic of Ireland, and next thing you're going to Poland next week for Ukraine in a pretty dire situation, I think there would be massive question marks. But it's a results business, regardless of style of football, what it means for changing of the guard of Irish football. If you're not winning games, like the pressure, you deserve to be under pressure. And
as we know, this tournament's important. Second place would most likely secure second seeding in Euro 2024 draw in October. That's not nothing. That can't be overlooked.
No, and the benefits of success in a Nations League campaign are massive. If, as Stephen Kenny had wanted, Ireland could get promoted, suddenly you're looking at glamour ties here against England, Germany, all the money that brings into the FAI. As you say, an increase in your seedings. Right now it looks almost certain Ireland will be third seeds again, and you're in that same old scenario without, in all likelihood, if you finish second or third in this group, of having a playoff through the Nations League, which is what Ireland got through to the playoffs the last time. So they need to take this opportunity. If they end up finishing third, fourth in this group, the next couple of years could be very, very difficult, and you are so reliant on getting a favourable draw, because you're probably not going to have that backstop of a playoff through the Nations League. So David Connolly was on yesterday saying he felt Stephen Kenny should still be experimenting, and he should have gone with Will Keane and Michael Obafemi up front and tried something different. That's not what the Nations League is. You only have to look at the quality of games every night on television now in League A, League B. Teams are taking these seriously. We've got to take it seriously.
Yeah, I agree. And Will Keane was given his chance against Lithuania and didn't take it. So there'll be very little experimentation over the next three games. As we mentioned, it's Ukraine this evening, Scotland at home on Saturday, and then over to Poland to play Ukraine again. So it's not easy by any means. Ukraine 27th in the world to Ireland's 47th. And it must be said, and this predates Stephen Kenny, but competitive games against higher ranked opposition at home No wins really of late. Bosnia-Herzegovina in 2015, the last time Ireland beat a higher ranked opposition at home. And since then we've seen Serbia twice, Austria, Wales 3 times, Denmark 3 times, Switzerland, Portugal. There have been occasional draws but no wins. So we're not in the habit of beating teams ranked above us over the last 6-7 years. The team news again, if you're just tuning in, will have commentary with Stuey Byrne and Nathan Murphy. Caoimhín Kelleher in goal. Just 2 changes for Stephen Kenny this evening. One is injury enforced. Back 3 once again of Collins, who in fairness did very well on Saturday. Duffy is there and Egan is there. Cyrus Christie comes in at right wing back. Seamus Coleman injured. Hendrick and Cullen once again in midfield. Enda Stevens at left wing back. Ogbene on the right hand side. We might see Callum Robinson moving a touch over to the left. Jason Knight's on the side. See how that plays out. It depends to what extent Hendrick and Cullen need men in midfield. As Nathan was saying, it does look as if Ukraine have mirrored the Irish formation, so perhaps no need for a third midfielder in there. Hendrick and Cullen won't be outnumbered. We have Richie McCormack with us as well. You can hear us, Rich?
Can indeed, Joe. How are you?
We are very well. We are very well, enjoying the view. I mean, it's a nicer view than usual. I do love looking at you every Thursday, every weeknight. Don't worry,
every night,
yeah. But we've got sunshine. We've got both teams on the pitch. We've got blue skies, and they're not blaring the music just yet, which is a relief as well. I have to say. So
that's actually the fact that you haven't had to talk over each other and over yourself is actually really unusual. I wonder, it's almost like they've taken advice on board, which would be just extremely unexpected from those in charge of the Aviva.
We'll hold our breath. I think we've just jinxed ourselves, I suspect. So the Newsround, as ever, brought to you with Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Plenty going on today.
Yeah, at the same time in Ireland's group, Scotland are playing Armenia. That game at Hampden Park, as I say, kick-off also at 7:45. And having secured World Cup qualification on Sunday, a buoyant Wales are in Nations League action.
There we go, right on cue.
There we go. The other game in that group is seeing Belgium face Poland, and all of those matches kicking off at 7:45.
We'll keep you up to date across the evening. Meanwhile, each press conference seems to outdo the last.
Yeah, it does. Lee Westwood believes he'd be stupid not to take the money on offer from the Saudi-backed LIV Golf Series. The veteran of 10 Ryder Cups was one of the conscripts put up to face the media ahead of their opening event at the Centurion Club this week. But both Westwood and his compatriot Ian Poulter were unable, or indeed unwilling, to answer questions on the morality of the Saudi venture.
Lee and Ian, is there anywhere in the world you wouldn't play? If Vladimir Putin had a tournament, would you play there?
That's speculation. Not even going to comment on speculation.
So, just in a generality, is there anywhere you wouldn't play on a moral basis? If the money was right, is there anywhere you wouldn't play?
I don't need to answer that question.
Sorry?
I don't need to answer that question.
Lee, do you want to answer it? Would you have played in apartheid South Africa, for example?
Well, you're just asking us to answer a hypothetical question there, which...
Well, they're moral questions, aren't they?
Answer a question on that.
Yeah, there we are, quite extraordinary. And Phil Mickelson was speaking as well, and I was making the point even on Twitter that much like Graham McDowell before him yesterday, Phil Mickelson did reach a point, Nathan, when he was condemning what happened to Jamal Khashoggi and was talking about reprehensible acts. And he suddenly reached that stunning point where he condemned all that, but his actions are so blatantly at odds with his words that he didn't know what to say next, much like McDowell, and plumbed for, look, Live Golf is going to help the game of golf, and golf can do great things in the world, and so I'm thrilled to be here, etc. And they're two guys who are going in with their eyes open. As for Westwood and Poulter earlier, it's a pity we don't have the visuals in this, because Poulter's facial expression as he was been asked about Vladimir Putin, I mean, he said it's speculation. I don't think there's any speculation Putin's hosting a golf tournament just now, and Westwood, I mean, look, these are very difficult questions. Apartheid South Africa, I mean, you could just see Westwood and Poulter, and to an extent McDowell and Mickelson yesterday and today, just realising the consequences of their actions in a very real way, trying to field these questions and having really very little of substance to be able to say back.
Nothing of substance, and there is no way of giving an answer to this that can reflect well on the players involved. If they were honest and said the only reason I'm here is because it's a life-changing amount of money and all I'm thinking about is that, nothing else, they're going to get hammered. I think the players have weighed up the options. They've got their little bit of PR advice. They've tried to play it down as much as possible and hope that once they get through this 24 hours that somehow all of this is going to go away. But this rolls on to Portland, Oregon in less than a month. There's 8 tournaments. The journalists are going to go. They're going to ask the questions. And are they eventually going to have an answer? I don't think so. It is greed, it is money, that is the overriding factor. I don't think human rights comes into it for any of these players.
They may start quelling the press conferences. Rob Harris certainly yesterday was effectively ignored in the second press conference after he'd asked very pointed questions in the first, and then he had raised his voice off mic, and it got very ugly, and he was told to be polite, even though he hadn't been chosen to ask a question, despite having his hand up for the guts of a half hour. So who knows, come Portland, they may just choose not to give the American journalists their go, because I'm sure they'll be queuing up to do something similar. And the breaking news, of course, this evening is that Bryson DeChambeau and
Patrick Reed,
are signed up as well. I mean, look, Reed we can live without. DeChambeau is a big loss for the PGA Tour.
An enormous loss. He's one of the biggest names in golf right now in terms of his social following, in terms of his success, and he's had some injury problems, so he's faded from the picture somewhat over the last few months. But he is up there in the top 3 biggest superstars in the modern game. He's still in his 20s, so it's not as if his best days are past him, like Dustin Johnson probably and Phil Mickelson. And it's a slow drip feed. Now, all of the names that have gone so far, you could have predicted. They're all quite divisive figures who maybe never sat comfortably among the average PGA Tour golfer. But the rumours around Bryson DeChambeau are over 100 million up front. It's incredibly difficult, and I know Rory McIlroy and Justin Thomas were out at the Canadian Open today saying, listen, if you make your decisions based on money, generally they're always going to be bad decisions. It's very difficult for them not to look at the fees involved here and start thinking, well, what would I be worth? And also, if enough go, are you left with what on the PGA Tour? It certainly looks as though we're going to have a massive divide where the best players in the world are not going to play many tournaments together for the coming years.
Yeah, the majors and the JP McManus Pro-Am will be the only true gatherings of the world's best. And look, I think the reality is human nature is human nature. Everybody at some stage would have their price. These are eye-watering sums of money to turn down, and it's worth keeping in perspective a golf tour versus selling arms or handing over billions in for oil. There probably is a degree where perspective has been lost a touch, but on an individual basis, it's very hard for these players to justify what they're doing. We told you, Richie, we've been bleeding on about this for I don't know how long, and here we are. And I suppose what will happen now is that some of the other big boys in the PGA Tour will see Taylor Gooch make $30 million and think, well, it's time for me to go over as well. I think if it turns out that they're all able to play the majors, then there could be a mass exodus, and that's the pinch point, I suppose.
It does seem as well that the PGA Tour massively underestimated the threat of this. I think when we started talking about it 6 months ago, we thought this will never happen. Yeah. It's a little bit of leverage. The PGA Tour will respond, increase prices, but we'll never in this scenario where we're literally on the eve of a tournament happening with Phil Mickelson and Dustin Johnson.
Everyone thought it was dead after the Shipnook-Mickelson interview.
And it feels as though that the PGA Tour, sorry Richie, it feels as though the PGA Tour have reacted, because they're going to come out in the next 48 hours with a response, but it's too late.
Listen to McCormack. He can't. Let me in on the golf chat, guys. Let me in
the golf chat. The greatest loser here is the consumer and the golf fan, because ultimately you've got a further fracturing of the golf calendar, which is already split in two, primarily with the DP World Tour and the PGA Tour. So you don't necessarily have all the golfers all at once piling into all of the tournaments. That's obviously never going to happen. But now you've got these selective tournaments that aren't as frequent, but are more money spinning than the PGA Tour ones, and they don't necessarily fit in, obviously, to the line of the year, essentially, and feeding into the end of year championships and all that kind of stuff. So they're kind of standalones, and if they're standalones, do they mean anything if they have no relation to the other tours that are going on around the world? And how do you kind of cover them in that respect if they're not? Like if they're just invitationals, which is essentially what it is at the moment.
Yeah.
Do you give it any serious credence in terms of competition? And do you give it any real comparison to established tournaments that aren't majors? You're looking at like TPC Sawgrass and stuff like that. Things that aren't majors but are certainly up there in terms of their stature.
Yeah, no,
it's everybody's just going to be pulled in three different directions. And then nobody wins, because nobody knows what to watch. Nobody knows what anything means. And ultimately, if that's the case, very few people end up caring.
No, listen, your only option left really is to listen to Golf Weekly, I would think.
What time are we getting the private jets in London in the morning?
No, you're dead right, Richie. Who knows how to cover this thing at Centurion? Like, do you carry it on the Sunday bulletins when we're on air? I mean, it's a very odd situation. Anyway,
Well, like it's a wider problem in sport, because you have like these boxing exhibitions that are only going to become more prevalent again, and Jake Paul has been key to them, where they just happen because they happen and there's enough noise around them.
Yeah.
And this is pretty much the same thing in terms of a sporting competition. There's enough noise around it that suddenly people will pay attention, but ultimately it doesn't matter, because it doesn't play into anything else. It doesn't play into Race to Dubai or anything like that, or FedEx points or anything. So why should you care beyond these lads getting a load of money?
No, totally true. I guess you could draw a slight parallel with the PGA Tour and say, well, the reason you might watch the Canadian Open this week is, you win a PGA Tour event, but ultimately who cares? But maybe it's to see, well, what's someone's form like ahead of the US Open next week, and therefore, maybe in the context of the majors, people start paying attention. But I totally see where you're coming from. We've bleated on about this admittedly too much here. Clock is against us.
3-hour golf weekly special coming tomorrow.
Do you want to bring us a last story or two or three, and then we'll go?
Yeah, lots of bit of transfer news around, and one that's actually broken in the last hour or so. Southampton have emerged as a leading candidate to sign Republic of Ireland goalkeeper Gavin Bazunu from Manchester City. Southampton have let Fraser Forster join Tottenham on loan on a free transfer, and Bazunu could command a £10 million fee at City. He would initially be a number 2 at Southampton with a view to becoming their number 1. Liverpool believed to have tabled a €100 million bid for Benfica striker Darwin Núñez. 80 million of that will be up front, with a further 20 million in potential add-ons. A 5-year contract at Anfield is on the table for Núñez, who scored 34 goals in 41 games for Benfica last season, even including a goal in each leg of their Champions League quarter-final with Liverpool. Sadio Mane is edging closer to a move to Bayern Munich. Meanwhile, the Senegalese forward has a year left on his Anfield deal, and Liverpool have already rejected a Bayern total offer of €30 million. Liverpool value Mane at closer to 50 million, and a Bayern delegation is heading to England to get that deal done. Callum O'Dowda has joined Cardiff City on a 3-year deal. He was a free agent following his release from Bristol City. Newcastle have made Matt Targett's loan move from Aston Villa a permanent one. James Tarkowski has been having a medical at Everton today ahead of a free transfer from Burnley. And Leeds have signed Danish international right back Rasmus Christensen from Red Bull Salzburg, around a £10 million fee involved in that one as well.
2 texts which maybe sum up how we all hear what we want to hear. Somebody says, if we lose tonight, will the media finally call for their hero, Stephen Kenny's head, or will he continue to get special treatment? The other text, media trying to get Kenny the sack. It's typical. I'm sick of it. So perhaps we're pitching up somewhere in the middle. We're trying to do neither, I assure you. Richie, thanks very much.
Nice one, lads.
Cheers. Nathan Murphy staying with us here at the Aviva Stadium.